The Baltic Sea in late October ran under a Force 5 gale and a rain squall that removed every visual reference from the bridge windows and replaced them with gray, not fog. Fog was a localized atmospheric condition that degraded visibility incrementally and could lift. The October rain squall in the central Baltic was a different category of weather event, a full ceiling, full visibility elimination that arrived with less than 4 minutes warning and settled in with the specific persistence of an autumn Baltic system that had been building over Sweden for 3 days before reaching the central sea lanes. Rain on the Baltic at Force 5 did something specific to the tactical environment. It washed the thermal contrast from the water surface that FLIR depended on for contact identification. A vessel's hull at 200 yards in a Baltic rain squall was identical in thermal signature to the wave-churned water around it because both hull and water were wet, both were cold, and the rain's thermal equalization effect reduced the temperature differential that infrared imaging required. The radar was the eye. The FLIR was blind. The bridge windows showed gray water and gray sky and the white caps of a Force 5 sea state and nothing else. The U.S. destroyer had been in this condition for 22 minutes when the contact appeared. Not a surface contact. The radar had been tracking a Steregushchiy class corvette 8.4 nautical miles to the northwest since 0920, logged and assessed as routine Baltic Fleet patrol. The corvette had been maintaining its position without closing. The contact that appeared at 10:34 a.m. was different. Bridge CIC. New surface contact bearing 325, range 4.1 nautical miles. Contact is small, high return for its size, consistent with a fast attack or rigid inflatable. Speed 26 knots. No AIS. No visual possible. Rain squall degrading FLIR beyond 800 meters. Contact bearing is consistent with an approach from the direction of the Russian Kaliningrad exclave coast. CPA estimate 180 yards. Time to CPA, approximately 7 minutes. Small contact, 26 knots. No AIS. No FLIR. From the direction of Kaliningrad. The officer of the deck was looking at a radar return that he could not confirm visually, could not confirm thermally, could not confirm by any sensor except the radar itself. Radar gave him position and speed and approximate size. Radar did not give him crew count, equipment, flag, or intent. In normal conditions, FLIR resolved those questions at range. In a Baltic Force 5 rain squall, FLIR was a monitor showing the uniform cold gray-green of rain-drenched sea surface with no distinguishable features beyond 800 meters. He pressed the intercom. At 10:36 a.m., the captain stepped onto the bridge. He looked at the radar display. The small contact at bearing 325, range 3.9 nautical miles, 26 knots. He looked at the bridge windows, which showed nothing except rain and white caps. He looked at the FLIR monitor, which showed nothing useful at 3.9 nautical miles in current conditions. I have the con. He noted the Steregushchiy corvette's position, still at 8.2 nautical miles northwest, holding. The corvette had not moved in correlation with the new contact's appearance. 2 contacts, one closing fast, one holding, but both in the same geographic sector. CIC bridge. Give me the rain squall limits. What's our FLIR effective range right now? Bridge CIC. In current rain conditions, FLIR effective range for vessel detection and identification is approximately 600 to 800 meters. Beyond that, the thermal equalization from rain precipitation makes contact identification unreliable. Radar is our primary sensor for ranges beyond 800 meters. The rain squall appears to be a consistent system. We don't have a clear edge to it from our position. It may extend several nautical miles in all directions, 600 to 800 meters of FLIR, 3.8 nautical miles to the contact. The contact would be at 800 meters, FLIR range, in approximately 5 minutes at 26 knots. At that point, the FLIR would see it. But at 800 meters and 26 knots, it would be at CPA in less than 2 minutes after FLIR acquisition. The FLIR acquisition window and the CPA were separated by less than 2 minutes. That was the tactical problem the rain had created. The primary identification sensor became available so close to CPA that the identification and the response decision would have to happen simultaneously. CPA to contact, 6 minutes, 20 seconds. At 10:37 a.m., the fire control radar entered active tracking mode on the new contact. At 3.8 nautical miles, the tracking solution on a small fast contact at 26 knots was precise and held. If the contact had any electronic warfare capability, and small fast attack boats in the Baltic fleet's operational inventory carried basic threat detection, it would be receiving fire control radar emissions within seconds. The fire control radar sent the standard message, "You are inside a tracking solution." At 10:37 a.m., the Steregushchiy corvette to the northwest began moving. Bridge CIC. Steregushchiy contact is underway. New heading 175, south toward our position. Speed 16 knots. Revised CPA estimate 400 yards. Time to CPA 28 minutes. 2 contacts now. The small fast contact approaching from the direction of Kaliningrad at 26 knots. The Steregushchiy approaching from the northwest at 16 knots. Both closing. Different timelines. The fast contact would arrive at CPA in 6 minutes, the Steregushchiy in 28. But the Steregushchiy's movement at the same moment as the fast contact's appearance created the coordinated pattern that the Baltic Fleet encounter record had been describing for years. The fast contact as the primary provocation, the surface warship as the secondary pressure that arrived after the primary had established the tactical situation. The captain was reading both tracks. He turned to the CIC intercom. Activate LRAD. Directed toward the fast contact. In Russian, standard fast boat advisory, unidentified vessel approaching from bearing 325, this is a U.S. warship, maintain safe distance, cease your approach. Repeat twice. The LRAD activated at 10:37 a.m. Directed toward bearing 325 at 3.7 nautical miles at the specific power level that would reach the fast contact, given the rain squall's sound dampening effects. Rain at force 5 reduced sound propagation differently from fog. Rain was a distributed absorber, but the LRAD's directional output was sufficient to reach the contact's position at this range with intelligible sound. CPA to fast contact, 5 minutes, 30 seconds. At 10:39 a.m., the first friction event arrived through the radar system. The Baltic rain squall was affecting radar in a way that the standard atmospheric analysis had not fully accounted for. The specific rainfall rate, the CIC watch officer estimated 25 to 30 millimeters per hour based on the barometric and visual data available, was producing radar attenuation. The rain droplets were absorbing and scattering the radar's transmitted pulse, reducing the effective detection range, and, more significantly, reducing the precision of small contact tracking at extended ranges. The fast contact, which at 3.5 nautical miles had been showing a clean, single radar return, was now showing intermittent splitting into 2 returns, not because there were 2 contacts, but because the rain's attenuation was causing the radar's signal processing to occasionally interpret the contact's return as 2 separate objects. Bridge CIC. Contact is showing intermittent radar splitting. Rain attenuation at current rainfall rate is producing a dual return artifact on the fast contact at 3.4 nautical miles. This is a radar processing artifact, not a second vessel. I am applying manual tracking override to maintain contact integrity. Speed and bearing are consistent throughout both returns. Single contact, single track. Manual tracking override in a rain squall. The watch officer was managing the radar's behavior under adverse conditions by manually maintaining the contact integrity when the automated processing introduced artifact splits. The contact was real and singular. The tracking required active operator management. CPA to fast contact, 4 minutes, 15 seconds. At 10:39 a.m., the Seahawk was on the flight deck in transit configuration. The captain authorized launch. In a Force 5 sea state with a rain squall at the surface, Seahawk flight operations were at the margin of safe envelope, not outside it, but at the margin. The specific conditions, 25-knot sustained winds, gusting to 32, with rain reducing visibility to approximately 400 meters at the surface, required the flight deck officer's specific assessment before launch authorization was valid. At 10:39 a.m., the flight deck officer's assessment was, launch is viable. Conditions are at the edge of envelope. Pilot awareness required. The Seahawk launched at 10:40 a.m. into a gray Baltic with 400-meter surface visibility and force 5 winds. The pilot climbed to 300 feet. The standard 400-foot documentation altitude was inadvisable in current wind conditions, and reported, Bridge, Seahawk. I'm at 300 feet. Surface visibility is approximately 400 meters. I can see the water surface, but I cannot see the contact visually at this range. I'm using radar and thermal in combination. Thermal return on the fast contact at 2.8 nautical miles. I'm getting a degraded but present signal. Contact appears to be a single hull, high speed, consistent with a small craft. I am recording. Degraded but present thermal signal. The rain squall had reduced the Seahawk's FLIR effectiveness to the same 800-meter approximate range that the ship's own FLIR faced. At 2.8 nautical miles, the contact was still beyond effective thermal identification from both the ship and the helicopter. CPA to fast contact, 3 minutes, 40 seconds. At 10:41 a.m., the second friction event arrived. The LRAD had been running its broadcast since 10:37 a.m. At 10:41 a.m., the fast contact reduced speed from 26 knots to 18 knots. The speed reduction was visible on the radar display as a change in the rate of bearing update. The contact was covering less distance per sweep. The LRAD broadcast had reached the contact. The contact had responded, but the contact had not stopped. 18 knots was still a closing approach. The CPA projection, which had been holding at 180 yards, shifted outward, 210 yards at the new speed. Still inside safe approach distance for a contact with unknown intent in adverse conditions. Contact has reduced speed, now tracking at 18 knots. CPA revised to 210 yards. 210 yards. The captain had noted the speed reduction and noted that the contact had not turned away. 18 knots on a closing course in a rain squall in the Baltic from the Kaliningrad direction, with no AIS and a Steregushchiy moving from the northwest. The contact was responding to the LRAD broadcast, but not complying with it. CPA to fast contact, 3 minutes. At 10:42 a.m., the LRAD broadcast a second cycle, this time with an additional element. The Russian broadcast named the Steregushchiy's approach. Unidentified vessel bearing 325, speed 18 knots. This is a United States Navy warship. You are approaching from the Kaliningrad sector in a rain squall with no AIS and no navigation lights. A Steregushchiy class corvette is also closing on our position from the northwest. We are tracking both contacts. This approach is being documented. Cease your approach and identify yourself on channel 16 immediately. Naming the Steregushchiy. The second LRAD broadcast acknowledged to the fast contact that the U.S. vessel was aware of both contacts simultaneously, that the coordinated approach had been identified as coordinated, and that both contacts were being tracked. At 10:43 a.m., the fast contact reached 800 meters, FLIR effective range. The FLIR operators report at 10:43:20 a.m. Bridge, CIC. FLIR has resolved the fast contact at 800 meters. Single hull, consistent with Karakurt or Steregushchiy class associated rigid inflatable, approximately 8 to 10 meters, 2 crew visible as thermal signatures. No weapons visible. Contact appears to be a standard Baltic Fleet fast inflatable of the type used for reconnaissance and standoff approach operations. The contact is continuing approach at reduced speed. 2 crew. No visible weapons. A standard Baltic Fleet reconnaissance type rigid inflatable. Not a fast attack boat with weapon systems. Not a boarding preparation craft. A reconnaissance asset. The identification arrived at 800 meters, approximately 90 seconds before CPA at 18 knots. The captain had the FLIR identification. He also had the rain squall, the Force 5 sea state, the Steregushchiy at 6.4 nautical miles in closing, and a rigid inflatable with 2 crew at 800 meters and 90 seconds from CPA. CIC bridge. CIWS passive thermal tracking on the fast contact. Seahawk, I want you between the contact and our starboard beam at 300 feet. I want the contact crew to see the helicopter over them. The CIWS barrel oriented toward the fast contact. The Seahawk descended from 300 feet to 200 feet and repositioned to the destroyer's starboard beam, placing itself between the approaching rigid inflatable and the destroyer's hull at 200 feet altitude in a force 5 wind. At 200 feet in a force 5 rain squall, the Seahawk's downwash created a moving column of disturbed air and water spray that was visible and audible from the rigid inflatable below. At 800 meters in closing, the inflatable's crew could see the helicopter over them. CPA to fast contact, 1 minute, 15 seconds. At 10:44 a.m., the fast contact altered course. Not stopped, altered course. 5 degrees to the west at 18 knots, creating a track that would carry it 260 yards north of the destroyer's position, rather than the 210-yard CPA it had been on. The CPA projection opened from 210 yards to 285 yards. The contact maintained 18 knots, but its track was now diverging. The course change was minimal but directional. The 5 degrees west was in the direction away from the destroyer's course, not parallel to it. The rigid inflatable was not turning around. It was adjusting its track to pass further from the destroyer. The Seahawk at 200 feet over the contact's approach track had produced the visible presence that changed the inflatable crew's course calculation. Not fire control radar, the radar emission had been present since 10:37 a.m. and had not changed the contact's course. Not the LRAD broadcast, the broadcast had reduced the contact's speed but not changed its course. The helicopter at 200 feet in the force 5 rain directly over their approach track had changed the course. CPA to fast contact, 1 minute. At 10:44:30 a.m., the fast contact reached its CPA, 288 yards. In the rain squall at 288 yards, the inflatable was not visible from the bridge windows. It existed as a radar return and a FLIR thermal signature and a Seahawk camera image at 200 feet altitude, 288 yards. The contact passed 288 yards off the destroyer's starboard side at 18 knots in a force 5 rain squall, documented by a radar operator manually tracking through rain attenuation artifacts, by a FLIR operator with 800-meter effective range, and by a Seahawk pilot at 200 feet managing 32-knot wind gusts. The contact did not stop. It continued west at 18 knots, its track now carrying it away from the destroyer's course. At 10:45 a.m., the fast contact's bearing began to open. The contact was past CPA, and its track was taking it further south-southwest rather than circling back for another approach. The tail appeared at 10:46 a.m. The Steregushchiy corvette, which had been at 16 knots on its southbound approach track, reduced speed to 10 knots. The CPA projection for the Steregushchiy shifted outward from 400 yards to 520 yards. The corvette was decelerating. The primary contact, the rigid inflatable, had passed CPA and was opening. The secondary contact, the Steregushchiy, was decelerating following the inflatable's passing. The coordinated operations first phase had completed. The second phase was being adjusted. The blink came in 3 layers. On the radar display, Steregushchiy continuing to decelerate from 10 knots to 7, its CPA projection now at 600 yards and opening. The corvette was no longer approaching. Then, visual from the Seahawk pilot. Bridge, Seahawk. Fast contact is at 0.4 nautical miles south-southwest and continuing to open. I'm tracking the contact. It appears to be heading back toward the Kaliningrad coast. I cannot confirm visual, rain still degrading my surface visibility. Radar and thermal show the contact on a southwestward track. Then, Channel 16 from the Steregushchiy at 10:47 a.m. in English. American warship, this is the Russian Navy vessel to your northwest. We are continuing our patrol operations. No further approach to your position is intended. No further approach intended. The Steregushchiy Channel 16 broadcast was the most explicit blink statement in the record, a direct statement that the approach that had been underway was being discontinued. The captain noted the Steregushchiy broadcast. He said nothing. At 10:48 a.m., the LRAD was secured. The fire control radar returned to standby mode as the fast contact passed 2 nautical miles and continued to open. The CIWS returned to passive surveillance. The Seahawk climbed back to 300 feet and established a documentation orbit until the fast contact was beyond 3 nautical miles. Then, the captain authorized recovery. The Seahawk recovered to the flight deck at 10:54 a.m., a flight deck still in Force 5 conditions, the flight deck officer timing the landing to the deck motion cycle as he had timed the launch. No one on the bridge spoke for a long moment. The rain was continuing. The bridge windows still showed gray water and white caps and rain. The visual picture of the past 22 minutes of tactical encounter was exactly the same as the visual picture of the 22 minutes before the contact appeared. Gray. The entire encounter, from first contact detection at 10:34 a.m. to Steregushchiy Channel 16 at 10:47 a.m., had been conducted without a single visual identification from the bridge. Radar and FLIR and the helicopter had managed the picture. The bridge had managed the response. The eyes had been electronic throughout. The helmsman had held course through the encounter in Force 5 conditions, the specific additional demand of holding a precise heading when the sea was actively pushing the hull with wave action. In Force 5, a helmsman was not maintaining a course against a steady environment, but fighting the sea's own intention to move the vessel off its heading. He had done it for 22 minutes of background watch and then 13 more minutes of tactical encounter, and the course had been what it was supposed to be, plus or minus the degrees that the sea extracted and the degrees that his hands returned. The officer of the deck was looking at the radar display. The fast contact at 4.1 nautical miles and opening. The Steregushchiy at 7.2 nautical miles, now at 6 knots, effectively holding. The contact picture was returning to its morning baseline. 1 Steregushchiy in patrol position, northwest in the rain and the Baltic. He straightened his collar. The captain walked to the chart table. The encounter report would go to 6th Fleet, to NATO Baltic Command, and to the Fleet Intelligence Unit that maintained the operational record of Baltic Fleet fast boat reconnaissance activities. The specific intelligence value of this encounter included documentation of a coordinated fast inflatable plus surface warship approach in Force 5 conditions, the confirmed radar attenuation profile of Baltic rain squalls at specific rainfall rates, the FLIR effective range boundary at 25 to 30 mm per hour rainfall, and the Seahawk's operational performance data at 200 feet in sustained 32-knot gusts. Full encounter report to 6th Fleet and NATO Baltic Command. Include the radar tracking record with the rain attenuation artifact documentation, the FLIR effective range log, the LRAD broadcast transcripts in Russian, the Seahawk deployment log including the specific environmental parameters for the 200-foot low-altitude repositioning, and the Steregushchiy track, including the Channel 16 blink broadcast. The encounter is the operational record for Baltic rain squall tactical procedures I wanted in the doctrine review cycle. He looked at the contact picture once more. The rain was still there. The course was still the course. Continue the transit. Good watch. The record assembled here speaks in the language the ocean keeps. 1 Russian Baltic Fleet reconnaissance type, rigid inflatable, 8 to 10 meters, 2 crew, no AIS, no navigation lights, approached a U.S. destroyer from the Kaliningrad sector at 26 knots in a Force 5 rain squall at 10:34 a.m. 1 Steregushchiy class corvette began a coordinated approach from the northwest at 10:37 a.m. Tactical conditions, FLIR effective range, reduced to 600 to 800 meters by rain precipitation. Radar attenuation from rainfall rate-producing tracking artifacts requiring manual operator management. Fire control radar activated in tracking mode on both contacts. Yes, from 10:37 a.m. LRAD broadcasts in Russian. 2, first at 10:37 a.m., second at 10:42 a.m., naming the coordinated approach. Fast contact speed reduction following first, LRAD broadcast from 26 to 18 knots. Fast contact course change following Seahawk repositioning. 5 degrees west, CPA opened from 210 to 288 yards. FLIR identification of fast contact at 800 meters, yes, at 10:43:20 a.m., 90 seconds before CPA. Result, reconnaissance rigid inflatable, 2 crew, no visible weapons. Seahawk repositioned to 200 feet between contact and destroyer's beam. Yes, at 10:44 a.m. in Force 5 conditions with gusts to 32 knots. Course change by fast contact following Seahawk repositioning. Yes, 5 degrees west. CPA achieved at 288 yards. Fast contact continued opening southwest. Steregushchiy deceleration tell from 16 to 7 knots after fast contact passed CPA. Steregushchiy Channel 16 blink broadcast, no further approach intended. Rainfall, FLIR degradation confirmed. Radar attenuation artifacts managed by manual operator override. Seahawk operations in Force 5/32 knot gusts. Yes, at 200 feet. All systems operational throughout. Course alterations by U.S. destroyer, 0. Transit continued, yes. The Baltic rain equalized the thermal signatures of hull and water and made every electronic sensor work harder for the same information. The contact was a reconnaissance asset, 2 crew, identified 90 seconds before CPA. The identification was the last possible moment the rain allowed. The course held through the last possible moment and then passed it. The Baltic does not adjust its rain for anyone's tactical convenience.